go to Children's Church. Life is an interesting thing because there are those moments in life. Can you turn my get down over here? There are those moments in life that everything changes. There are those moments in life where they are momentous, and sometimes it's not because, something momentous happened. A couple years ago, I was in a car wreck. That was momentous. I knew life had changed then. But there are times when we seem to be having an ordinary day. Everything events, nothing abnormal. And all of a sudden, we realize something's different. Have you guys ever had moments like that? Where you can't really even define it, but something's different. Sometimes in the journey of faith, we have these moments where we really can't even explain why or how, but we know that we have had an experience of the presence of God. And things are different. The world has changed. And there are a lot of scholars and that have talked about, well, how do we talk about this? And they've made up words. There's this guy named Rudolf Otto. The first book I ever had to read when I was a graduate student was his book, The Idea of the Holy, which is this monograph that was translated from the original German that is really, really boring and really, really hard to read. And he drones on and on and on about this idea of experiencing God and what that's like. And he makes up words to describe it. The numinous and mysterious tremendum. Yeah, apparently when you have a PhD, you make up words. And that's what he does. Yeah, Sherry's she's working on her PhD right now. She's like, yes, I can make up words in. Because that's what he does. And he drones on and on and on. And the ironic thing, and the thing that really aggravated me after wading through this really, really boring book, he never really gets anywhere. He really doesn't come to a conclusion to say, this is what it is. We can describe all this stuff about it, but this is what happens. And it's interesting to me because he's had to make up all this language and he never is able to really come to a conclusion. Today we're going to look at a time in one of the disciples' lives, the apostles' lives, in which he has one of those moments where he has an experience of God. Now, theologically, we may call it a theophany, we may call it a call, but I think there's a problem when we try to put a definitive label on things like that, because we think that we can master experiences like that. When we label them definitively, we almost say, well, there's no mystery there. And I think when we do that, we miss out on a lot. So Ruthie and I, we have actually been reading through C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia. And when we were reading through the first book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, I guess the first book in the editions I bought because they've changed the order and stuff. But anyway, when we were reading through that, there was this passage that struck me. It's a passage where you've got these 4 kids that are transported to this magical land of Narnia, and they find out that they're part of something bigger, and that there's this guy named Aslan, and so they're just finding out about Aslan from these talking beavers because, well, it's fantasy, so you can have talking beavers, I guess. So anyway, they're eating with him, and this beaver starts talking about Aslan. And this is what the book says. It says, they say Aslan is on the move, perhaps has already landed. Now, a very curious thing happened. None of the children knew who Aslan was any more than you or I do. But the moment that the beaver had spoken these words, everyone felt quite different. Perhaps it is something, perhaps it has sometimes happened to you in a dream that someone says something which you don't understand, but in the dream it feels as if it had some enormous meaning. Either a terrifying one which turns the whole dream into a nightmare, or else a lovely one which turns the whole dream into something so too lovely to put into words, which makes it so beautiful that you remember it all your life and are always wishing you could get into that dream again. It was like that now. At the name of Aslan, each one of the children felt something jump inside of, in his insides. Edmund felt a sensation of mysterious horror. Peter felt suddenly brave and adventurous. Susan felt as if some delicious smell or some delightful strain of music had just floated by her. And Lucy got the feeling you have when you wake up in the morning and you realize it is the beginning of holiday or the beginning of summer. So you got this guy, Rudolph Otto, spends all this time, writes an entire book about this experience of God. Doesn't ever explain it, doesn't ever come to any conclusions. Then you have C.S. Lewis. In a children's book, explains what it means to have one of those moments where you experience God and everything changes. I think that's kind of fitting that we find such a profound and short passage in the children's book. Because after all, we must accept the kingdom of God as children. If you guys want to turn in your Bibles, let's turn to Luke chapter 5. Luke chapter 5. We're going to be reading verses 1 through 11. I'll be reading from the English Standard Version. Okay, this is what the text says. On one occasion, while the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word of God, he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, and he saw 2 boats by the lake. But the fishermen had gone out of them. They were washing their nets. Getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's, he asked him to put out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." And Simon answered, "Master, we toiled all night and took nothing, but at your word, I will let down the nets." And when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. They signaled for their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so that they began to sink. But when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so also were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid, from now on you will be catching men." And when they brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed him. This passage is located at the beginning of Jesus' ministry. He had been teaching in synagogues. He was known as a healer at this point. He had healed and cast out evil spirits. So as he is here by this lake at Gennesaret, which was a heavily populated area for this time, people are all around. They all want to hear him. They all want to know what he's going to say. Perhaps they think that they're going to see a miracle. So they're pressing in on him, and he sees a boat. And he says, "Well, that'll fix it." He gets into the boat and gets out a little bit so the people can't crowd him anymore. So he's able to teach. And so Simon takes him out in this boat and he teaches. He's got a floating pulpit, right? He's teaching out there, and after he's done teaching, that's when the story gets interesting. He tells Simon to let's go out a little further and put out your nets. which we look at it, we're like, okay, that may make sense, right? I mean, but we know from the text that they were done fishing at this point. They had cleaned their nets, or were in the process of cleaning their nets. And so Jesus tells the fishermen, okay, go put out your nets, which means the fishermen will then, again, have to clean their nets, right? Again. And so Simon says, okay, we're going to do it. He said, you know what? We've been fishing all night, but because you tell us to do this, we're going to do it. Now, when we look at that, we think, okay, well, that's cool, right? That makes sense. Actually, it doesn't. Because the best time to fish in that area is at night. So they had literally been fishing at the best time to fish all night long and not caught a thing. And these were fishermen. They knew what they were doing. It's not like they were amateurs or never been on the lake. No, they made their livelihood from catching fish. And so when Jesus comes and says, hey, put your nets out again. After you've worked all night, just do it one more time. It'll be all right. I'm surprised Peter didn't get insulted. I mean, because you've got this teacher that comes along and says, hey, put your nets out. I'm surprised Peter didn't say, hey, look, you may be all about the teaching. You may be a healer. You may be able to do miracles. But I'm the fisherman. I know what I'm doing. That's not what he did. He said, okay, we'll do it. He says yes. I wonder if there were other people that we don't read about in the Bible that Jesus asked to do something and they didn't say yes. And that's why we don't know about them. I wonder if when Peter was asked this, I wonder if he understood that this is one of those moments that changes everything. I wonder if he understood that his answer to this request would not just change his life, but would be a part of a movement that would change the world. Part of something that would result in the church, us, almost 2,000 years later, being here and reading about it. I wonder if he realized it was that big of a deal. So they put out their nets. And they bring up such a large catch of fish that their nets are starting to break. They actually have to call out to their partners that are still at land, hey guys, come and help us. It's not the right time to fish. You had this guy that isn't a fisherman that was telling them what to do. And they end up catching more than they can handle. In fact, even when their partners get out there, their boats begin to sink because of the catch. I mean, how many fishermen would like that? I mean, Blake, how would you like your boat to start sinking because all the fish you catch? That'd be a pretty good day. But that's what happened. And the reaction to this seems unusual. I mean, let's just be honest, we're already in unusual circumstances, right? Fishing the wrong time of day, catch a whole bunch of fish. You can't fit, the fish in the nets, have to put them in two boats and it makes them sink. Okay, if that wasn't strange enough, then Peter, when he sees all of this, he comes to Jesus, apparently in the boat. Maybe not in the boat, but we don't exactly know. Maybe it's after they get back to land. And he falls at his knees, Jesus' knees, and says, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man." This may seem a little out of place, but it's not, because Simon Peter understood that something had happened. Something had happened that changed everything. It was one of those moments. And he understands that he's experiencing the presence of God. And he understands that this Jesus is the reason for that. And so he comes to him, he says, "Depart from me." Now, when we look at it, we're like, if he realized this was the presence of God and Jesus had to do it, why is he telling Jesus to go away? That's not what he's saying. It's an idiom. Essentially, it's essentially asking something like, what are you doing with me? Why are you allowing this to happen? I don't get it. I wonder if this is one of those stories that Simon would tell his family years later. I wonder if it's one of those stories that he would tell his children about how this one day, this Jesus came and changed everything for him. Tell the story of how that worked out, how that came to fruition. And I wonder if in retelling the story, if he was ever able to fully express in words what this was like, what the recognition of Jesus felt like and what it meant. Now, I don't know about you, but I would like to think that there are things that are too wonderful, too magnificent, and too important and foundational to be able to ever fully express them in words. But that's just me. Because in my book, this moment, the way he must have felt, I think would fall into that category. Everything changes. He has a recognition of the fingerprint of the Creator in this event. He sees Jesus. He sees the fish. He sees everything that's happened, and he realizes that this is not just luck. Something important happened, and it changed everything for him. Even the other people that were around, that saw the fishermen catch a fish, they saw it as important. They're like, this, something just happened. You know, we may read the word that Luke uses is astonished. Now, when Luke uses that word, it's important. It's not just the people saying, whoa, that was a lucky catch. No, astonishment in the Gospel of Luke means the people recognize God working. The people recognize this is not natural, this is not luck, this is nothing other than the power of God. And so other people who saw this event knew this was something different. I wonder what went through their minds, though. I wonder what they thought about it when they saw this teacher after teaching gets these fishermen to throw their nets out in the deep at the wrong time of day, after they'd spent all night working and not catching anything, and they catch a load so big, it takes 2 boats to get it in to shore. I'm wondering if they started talking, is this guy the Messiah? This guy is a great teacher. This guy does miracles. This is amazing. Is this guy who we have waited for? Jesus tells Peter not to be afraid. Just kind of the standard reassurance that angels and God gives and Jesus gives when there is this event like this, when God comes into contact with people. Jesus says, don't be afraid. He says, from now on, you're going to be catching men. He says, yeah, you recognize this moment changes everything. Let me tell you how it's changed everything. And they get back to shore, and Peter, and James, and John, and Peter's brother Andrew probably, they all leave everything and follow Jesus. Because everything has changed for them. They leave everything they know and follow this teacher that they just met because they understood the importance of that event. On an everyday day, things seem to be going normal, and then all of a sudden, in a moment, it all changes for them. And to the idea of follow, sometimes we misunderstand words, I think. English language, language, always it seems like trying to do needlework with a sledgehammer. We just can't get things across sometimes. And English is not really, English is difficult because we have all these words that mean the same things, and when in other languages they have all sorts of idioms, they have all sorts of ways to get things across. And so this idea of follow is not just, well, they're going to tag along with this Jesus guy. for a while. This idea of follow means that they leave everything and they follow him as a student, as a disciple of Jesus. Where Jesus goes, these guys are going to follow. There's a saying, a rabbinic saying, is a blessing, in fact, that says, "May you be covered in the dust of your rabbi." And the idea behind that is the students of rabbis, the students of teachers in that day and age, they wanted to be just like their teachers so much that they would follow them so closely that whatever they kicked up when they were walking in the wilderness, it would cake the front of their disciples' clothes. Okay? That's what it meant to follow, that you didn't want to miss out. You wanted to be just like them. And so they follow Jesus. In the morning time, they're fishermen. But after that moment where everything changes, they were followers of Jesus. So what do we do with this? What do we do with this story? What does it mean to us? Well, I think the first thing we need to know is, just as Simon Peter and his brothers and his partners were invited into a relationship with Jesus, were invited to follow Jesus, were invited to be part of something much bigger than themselves, we are invited into a relationship with Christ. That Christ invites us to come and know him and follow him. We, each of us, just as Peter was told, you know what? You were a fisherman, but you're going to be fishing men now. We are called, also invited to be a part of Jesus' mission, to spread the good news, to be a catalyst in our world for the kingdom of God to be spread. We are each invited to follow Jesus. And the thing is, I talked about in the beginning that quote from Lewis talking about a dream that we want to get back into. That's sort of what that could be like when we experience God, that we always want to get back to that point. The thing is, the dream doesn't end. It's not like Peter had that moment and that moment passed. That moment continued as he followed God. He continued to have that experience of God, that presence of God in his life. And he continued as he followed Jesus. That dream did not end. That feeling, that purpose that he had did not end, even in death. The dream doesn't end. It goes on into eternity. Now, part of following Jesus is that we don't have all the answers. That's okay. I mean, the text doesn't say anything about John or James or Peter or Andrew saying, okay, Jesus, what is the retirement plan for this following you thing? What are the wages? No, it says they got back, they left everything and followed Jesus. Sometimes I think in our culture we want to plan, we want to know everything. We want to have everything all mapped out from the very beginning. I wish I could tell you that following Jesus, following God, that's going to happen. But my short experience, what happens is we have plans and God changes them. And what turns out is what God changes those plans for end up much, much better than we can ever imagine. Let me tell you something about the plans that my wife and I had that changed. We lived in Anderson. We loved Anderson. We thought we were going to be there for 20 years. That didn't happen. We're in Oklahoma now. And guess what? We couldn't be happier. Because we followed God. He takes us into places that we don't always understand. He takes us to places where we're like, okay, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here, but I'm following you. We are called many times into the unknown. But it's okay, because we're following God. And God has called us there. And where God has called us, he has a purpose for us. So the question is, will we answer the call? Will we, like Peter, say, okay, yes? Or are we going to refuse it and miss out? And be like many, I imagine, of the unknown people that were connected to Jesus' ministry that he invited to follow him and said no. Will we join in the purpose that God has for his church and expanding his kingdom, in being bearers of the grace, love, and forgiveness of God? The fact that Jesus came so that we could know God, so that we could be forgiven, so that we could experience heaven here and now and into eternity. Are we going to be a part of that? That's the call for each and every follower of Jesus. Are you going to answer that? My prayer, I stole it from somewhere else, is not that God would grant me safety, not that God would grant me security. I'd like to have those things, but probably not going to, and that's okay. But grant me awe and wonder. The journey of faith is meant to be an adventure. As we follow Jesus, he's going to call us to some unmarked places. He's going to call us into some situations that we're like, okay, this is different. Are we going to answer that call? Maybe you're here today and you have no relationship with God. The first step is God is inviting you to come and know him. Jesus died on the cross so that we could have a relationship with him. And he simply says, come, follow me. Come, receive the forgiveness that Jesus has already granted us through his death on the cross. Come, do that today. Sheila, if you want to come up. There she is. So, today this may be one of those moments for you where everything can change. Everything can be different. And maybe it just takes one step. Maybe it just takes a step out to come and come to the altars. Maybe you just you've got something that you're holding on to and God is saying, just let it go. Come to me. Follow me. Maybe that's you today. Maybe, like I said, maybe you've never received Christ as your Lord and Savior today. Jesus says, come. Follow me. Maybe you need to take that first step today. The altars are open. If you want to just come up and pray about anything, do that. If you want someone to pray with you, I'll be up here. I know Michelle will be up here. Anyone, if you want to come and pray, we just want to open off the altars. If today you're here and you've not received Christ yet, I urge you to accept Jesus' invitation. Come and follow me is what he said.